All right, so first of all, I just want to extend my condolences and say rest in peace to those 6 hardworking Mexican patriots who got blown to kingdom come at the Jose Cuervo factory in Mexico. Fucking terrible. Horrible. All right, so I noticed that Pen Pal came out of another one of his dry spells, and I haven't watched the video yet, but I did click on a highlighted portion that was posted by Bum, and Pen Pal was talking about how Havana only shows his ass on the Ave when SWV happens to be in town, which I hadn't thought about it like that. That is true. You know, it kills my soul to have to agree with Pen Pal about anything, but he's got a point on that one. And the next thing is SWV caught a fish. Apparently, he's out with some sort of person that knows what they're doing and put him on the fish. And he didn't know how to reel the fish in. He didn't know how to take the fish off the hook. And he had to put a glove on before touching the fish. Now, if his performance on the Ave with Havana wasn't enough to convince you that he is an absolute sissy, that right there has got to sell you. Good fucking God. Time to make an ice video. It's Friday. This is number 13. Friday the 13th.
Shot Bernard Crowe. Thought that he had killed him, but he actually didn't. And that's a whole other complicated story. I don't actually believe that they believed that they had killed Bernard Crowe for very long, but that's the legend that has endured. So Manson shot this well-known drug dealer who was very deeply tied in with the Hollywood and music industry drug scene, and he thought he'd now murdered someone. And this is someone who, you have to remember, Manson is reporting to a parole officer diligently and trying to avoid being sent back to prison. At this very point is right at the time when a film documentary was going to be made by Greg Jacobson, a friend of Terry Melcher's, about the Spahn Ranch to promote Manson's music. They were going to produce a documentary along the lines of Woodstock, which had come out in 1969 as well. Yeah, so the idea was, this was in July of 69, Manson was ready to put out one of these several albums, one that was made but recorded at Gold Star Studios with the Wrecking Crew by Terry Melcher, the other one that had begun to be worked on with Steve Desper and the Beach Boys. His career was moving in the direction of finally this album would be released and they would make a documentary about this group that at that time Greg Jacobson, who was Terry Melcher's talent agent, called The Family. At that time they needed a name, and that's where the name came from. So now he's committed this crime. He shot a major drug dealer. Word spreads to Terry Melcher and Dennis Wilson and the entire music people circle that he was involved with that Manson's nickname among these people was Crazy Charlie. And when Dennis Wilson and Terry Melcher and other people in the rock industry heard that he had now shot this guy, they dropped him completely. Although Melcher and Wilson maintained some slight contact, they then thought, okay, he's too unstable to continue with our plans to pursue his recording career. So it wasn't that he didn't have a recording contract or wasn't being taken seriously. It's that he was on the brink of his music career actually taking off when his friends or supporters in the music industry dropped him because of this crime. So now Manson is angry at Watson because he's gone in there and shot a man basically to rescue his girlfriend. And he feels like Tex Watson has dragged him into a crime that wasn't even his doing. You know, and you can argue that either way. Was it a stupid macho action to go in there with a gun? Possibly. But in either case, Manson felt, all right, to Charles Tex Watson, that he had been dragged into his drug dealing business, and now he could go back to prison because of what he's done. And it's totally destroyed his chances at any kind of recording career whatsoever. Not that that was that important to him, but you can understand the emotional fallout of that happening. So he's very angry at Charles Watson. Shortly thereafter that, there's a lot of tension between Watson and him, because now, according to the underworld code, Manson has gone in and shot the guy, and therefore Tex Watson owes Manson. And this is a phrase he said to me and many other people over and over again. I told Tex, now you owe me one. You owe me for what I've done for you. Now that can be interpreted in many ways. Now a sort of surge of chaos occurs because some people know about the shooting in the Spahn Ranch circle, the commune, and other people it's not known. And there's a kind of paranoia that starts to spread on the ranch, which previously it wasn't really like that. To make matters worse, Bobby Beausoleil, who, like Tex Watson, was sometimes part of the commune and sometimes independently and on his own, and was really more of an independent figure, certainly never a follower of Charles Manson. Like a lot of the men that were involved with the Spahn Ranch group, he wasn't really living there all the time, and he wasn't an integral part of the group as the women were. He had sold some drugs that he bought from this fellow Gary Hinman that I mentioned earlier in context with the Topanga Canyon Corral. He bought some mescaline from him. $1,000 worth of it is usually the agreed upon amount, because a biker club named Straight Satans that were hanging around the Spahn Ranch, and which I believe Manson was in touch with even earlier than that, were celebrating their 10th anniversary, and they wanted mescaline to help push the festivities into a higher dimension. So Bobby Beausoleil wanted to, in some way or the other, gain the respect of the Straight Satans, this biker club. And he purchased the mescaline from Gary Hinman. And as I told you with Linda Kasabian and Charles Watson, with Kowski, something about the mescaline was wrong. It was wrongly made. Something was defective about it. And some of these bikers in the Straight Satan fell ill. Manson told me that one of the women of the Straight Satans had a miscarriage. So instead of having a joyous celebration, it turned into getting a lot of the bikers sick at this 10th anniversary party. Danny DiCarlo, who was you could say the treasurer of this biker club, the Straight Satans, who was hanging around the Spahn Ranch, put a gun in Bobby Beausoleil's hands, and Beausoleil was a very young man at this point, not a hardened criminal like some of the others, and said, you better go back and get our money. So this is the same story you're starting to see again and again. It's about drug deals gone wrong, and we want our money back. So Beausoleil goes back to Gary Hinman, who's a friend of his, Manson's, and says, I need the money back. It's a complicated story, and there's, again, many different versions of what actually happened. In essence, it turns into an argument. At some point, Manson comes to Gary Hinman's house in Topanga Canyon, and sort of like he did with the Charles Watson misadventure with Bernard Crowe, if you're following the pattern here, he goes back to warn Hinman. He says, you better pay him back, and he cuts him on the ear and the side of the face with a sword that's like in a pirate cutlass shape. And this sword belonged to the Straight Satans, belonged to a member of this biker club, the Straight Satans. When he cuts Hinman and then he leaves, sort of as to give him a warning, you better pay Beausoleil what you owe him. Of course, now he's committed another felony that could place him back in prison. At some point after that, Beausoleil got into an argument with Hinman after Manson had left the premises and killed him. So you have now Manson believes he's killed this drug dealer, Lotzapapa, or Bernard Crowe. Now word starts to spread that Bobby Beausoleil has killed Gary Hinman because Susan Atkins and Mary Brunner had gone with him and they witnessed the crime. So they know now that Bobby Beausoleil had killed this friend of theirs, Gary Hinman. The important thing here is let's look at the pattern. What are these crimes about? It's a drug dealer that the people in Manson's group are very familiar with. Violence occurs against a drug dealer based on a drug deal that's gone wrong, so-called burn. So now, okay, these are totally banal crimes like are happening in the underworld at this very moment, and it's about the most routine kind of crime you can imagine. One drug dealer being angry at another and either committing violence or killing them. Nothing could be more common. It happens in gangland all the time. Suddenly, we're supposed to believe that the next crime, which was committed on August 8th and 9th of 1969, when Frykowski, Tate, Sebring, Parent, and Folger were killed, we're supposed to believe that this falls outside the scope of drug dealers who know each other killing other drug dealers. I don't believe that's true. I believe that, as I said before, Watson and Kasabian went back to do exactly the same thing as we've seen. They had been burned by Frykowski and possibly Sebring, though I'm not quite sure about that part of it. They wanted to go back to rob them, and it turned into the mayhem that occurred. It was intended as a violent robbery, and they wanted to get Jay Sebring's stash of drugs because Jay Sebring was a major cocaine dealer. They wanted to go back to his house, which was near the Cielo house. It was on Eastern Drive in the same neighborhood, and get his stash of drugs. It turned into a